Great. Let's kick things off here. So again, my name is Matt Kelly. I'm the business development manager at PeopleGrove. Prior to joining PeopleGrove in December, I was the associate director for alumni career services at Georgetown University, where I was actually leveraging PeopleGrove for my own programs. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to you today and join our panelists here for what we know is going to be a really interesting and great discussion. Before we get going, just a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available to all of the attendees and registrants today. You'll also be able to find it on our PeopleGrove YouTube channel, hopefully by the end of tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. Additionally, we are hoping to make this a really engaging webinar and really get you thinking as well. So we have a number of different poll questions that we have throughout the presentations today for you, but we want to encourage your questions as well throughout the entire presentation. We'll certainly leave some time at the end for some general Q&A, but if you have those questions in the moment, make sure you use that questions box and type them in, and we'll hopefully be able to address them as we go through our discussion today. And lastly, if you are having any technical difficulties with the webinar, you can also let us know via that question box as well. We'll do our best here on our side to manage any of those technical difficulties. So let's get going here. Before we kind of kick off this first part of our 5-part series we're calling the Giving Equation, I want to give you a little background into how we're thinking about this kind of series of discussions that we're going to have with some of our partners and thought leaders in the alumni space. You know, one of the things that we've thought about a lot at PeopleGrove is kind of the 3 T's of advancement and alumni relations. You know, we always talked about time, talent, and treasure in terms of ways that we were asking alumni to give back to us after graduation. We almost thought of the transaction between student and institution as a transaction that stopped at graduation, and then it was up to us as alumni relations professionals to ask them to continue to come back into our community. Well, as we know, with the cost of higher education, some of the trends we've seen in the job market, that transaction is no longer complete on graduation. We have to think about how we are providing value and engaging alumni past that graduation point. So when we were having this discussion in our office at PeopleGrove, we were thinking about those 3 T's. And traditionally, it's time, talent, and treasure as the 3 T's we're asking alumni to give to us. But what if we flip the script and asked us, well, can we be investing our time, our talent, and then our treasure and resources into providing alumni continued value after graduation, as a recognition that that transaction is no longer complete upon graduation. So the first part of our giving equation is that value. We have to think about how we are identifying the value and what alumni continue to need and want out of their relationship with our institutions as the first part of that equation. And that's the primary piece of it. That's the foundation of everything that comes after in this giving equation. The engagement piece is the tactics, the X's and O's, the blocking and tackling. What are we actually going to do with our value strategy that are going to bring alumni back into the fold and get them what they're asking for? And then if we're able to provide value and do so in an engaging way that really hits alumni where they are and meets them in places where they are, we are hoping to see philanthropic outcomes out of that engagement. And I think over the course of this 5-part webinar series, our hope to you is that we can show you how this type of engagement that provides continued value, continued community, connections with your institution is leading to those outcomes that you're looking for from your alumni relations office, from your advancement office, be they philanthropic or otherwise. So that's kind of an introduction to this series that we're going to be running through PeopleGrove throughout this end of September here and then into October. And we hope you're able to join us for all 5 of those parts with discussions from folks from Villanova, Georgetown. Today, we are excited to welcome CSU Fresno in Kansas to our discussion today. So we hope you're able to join us across that 5-part series. Before we get going with our discussion, I want to ask you a question. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you kind of rate the programming run by your alumni association? The 1 side is social, with the 5 side being more educational. Would love to get a sense from you today on how you would describe your own programming here. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a quick poll. Would love to see your answers here and get a sense from the audience around, you know, how would you kind of rate that experience? We'll leave this open for probably about 30 to 45 seconds here. Another 20 seconds. We got just about 2/3 of the vote in. Wonderful. Go ahead and close this and share the results here. So as you can see, this is something that we expected a little bit here, but the bell graph here kind of skews a little bit more towards the social. 42% of you said that you would actually rate it a 3, so kind of right down the middle. 37% 2. But as you can see, kind of the educational side is a little bit less. That tail there is a little bit lower, with 12% and 2% respectively for 4 and 5. So interesting to see that we all continuing to think about engaging our alumni in more social activities, be they game watches, happy hours, maybe even different tours across different cities through our regional clubs, things that might skew a little bit more towards the social instead of towards the educational. For an agenda for the next 45 minutes to an hour here, we're going to ask our panelists to introduce ourselves here. And then we'll take you kind of through a before, during, and after state of their own experiences with alumni surveys and how they were able to identify the value that their alumni were asking for from the institution continually post-graduation. So we'll start with a little Alumni Surveys 101, talk a bit more about those experiences, talk about looking ahead and how that data is being used and implemented across initiatives on campus, and then finish with some Q&A time. But again, I'd like to encourage you to continue to ask those questions throughout the presentation so that we can really make this a very engaging opportunity for everyone here. So let's meet our panelists here today. We're excited to be joined by 3 of our wonderful partners here at PeopleGrove, and I'll ask each panelist to kind of introduce themselves, talk a bit about their experience and their role at their institution, and we'll start here with Matthew and Jackie from Fresno State.
Hi, I'm Jackie Glasener, and I am the Executive Director of the Alumni Association here at Fresno State, and I've been in this role for about 22 years here on campus.
And my name is Matthew Schultz. I'm the Director of Engagement here with the Fresno State Alumni Association, and I've been in my role for just under 6 years.
And Christie.
Hi, I'm Kristi Lacle. I'm with the KU Alumni Association, and I have been in my role for 18 months as the Assistant Vice President of the Jayhawk Career Network.
Great. Thank you all for introducing yourselves there. So I want to ask another poll question of our audience very quickly before we jump into kind of your own experience here on the panel. Has your institution actually considered doing an alumni survey? Has it been discussed within your institution here? Have you done it? Have you discussed it? If no is the answer, that's totally acceptable as well. But we'd love to hear if you've actually implemented this. And I'm seeing a lot of yes answers right away that you actually have done an alumni survey, so that's excellent. Would love to hear some of your experiences as you go through our discussion today as well. Leave this open for probably another 15 seconds. Got another 2/3 of the vote has come in here. Awesome. Looks like about 75% of our attendees today have actually done an alumni survey, so that's excellent here. So to start our discussion off, I want to kind of start with Christie and just ask you a little bit about kind of the before state when you were looking at conducting your most recent survey. I know you've mentioned to me multiple times that you've actually done a couple surveys over the course of the last 10 to 15 years or so. But in terms of that last survey, what was the kind of the spur, what really spurred you to do that last survey, and why was the survey, did you feel like it was necessary to kind of understand your alumni population?
Yeah, so I should kind of back you up too. Like you mentioned, we've done several surveys over the last few years. 2009 being kind of one of the first surveys where we started asking questions, really in the career space, and asking our alumni how well we're doing in this space in general. We asked in 2009 and got the feedback we were kind of expecting, that we were not meeting their needs in this space. And so, we did some programming around that, just light programming, never really dedicated any resources to it other than, some programmatic elements within events and things like that. But we launched another survey before I got here in 2013. And again, asking our alumni base, what are the things that we are doing well and where are gaps, and really kind of honing in on that gap analysis to tell us where we're under delivering. And again, we heard the feedback that we do a lot of things really, really well. We're really engaged. We have a really great alumni base that's super engaged in our athletic programming, our event programming, but career, again, is where we saw a major gap. And so not only did we survey them, but then we started analyzing some of the themes. And once we started analyzing themes around career and words specifically, so some of those keywords, networking, professionalism, connections, jobs, search, we populated a word cloud that helped us really kind of hone in on that theme of career. And we knew then that that was where we needed to move our strategic priorities to align with what do career services out of the Alumni Association look like. So fast forward to 18 months ago, and my position was created as an answer to that survey feedback. And I've now been on my role for 18 months, and 6 months ago, or maybe a little 9 months ago, we did another survey to our alumni. And each different survey was a little bit differently run by different people. But again, still seeing some of the same themes. And now we feel like we're in a position where we have an answer to some of the questions that were previously popping up. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and so when you talk about that survey, you mentioned that it was a career focused survey. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, it was not a career focused survey, but the results that we found were primarily lacking in career services for our alumni base.
And when you think about why you decided to undertake the survey, were there things that you were hearing anecdotally, or maybe people were coming to the office to say, there are certain gaps? Was that kind of the
yeah.
survey?
So we did a few things. So we launched the survey. We looked at the gap analysis. So we had to determine where we're under delivering on something, or maybe where we're over delivering. So maybe we're putting a lot of effort into programming that doesn't have that perceived value of importance. So we did that. We analyzed that information. Like I said, we identified some of those themes, but then we took those anecdotal comments that were also being said and helped support the need for career and this position to be created. So we really relied on those three things to help guide us to get to where we are today and to help really hone in on our strategic priorities.
Got it. Understood. Thank you. Matthew, Jackie, would love to hear your experience on kind of what spurred you to undertake this type of survey initiative.
Yeah, so it's kind of along the same lines as Christy there. It really started, I was in a meeting with our vice president, the vice president of university advancement, one day, and she leaned over to me and whispered, "Matt, what do our alumni want?" And I leaned back and said, "I don't know." And so that spawned roughly almost 3 years of kind of what I'm calling our alumni research initiative. And it was done in 3 phases. We hired a local kind of consultant to conduct what we called a brand study, a series of focus groups, so qualitative research. And we developed all sort of methodology and whatnot of what kind of alumni we wanted to hear from, and conducted 2-hour-long focus groups, five different groups. We then followed that up with a quantitative survey that we were able to correlate some of the findings of that survey along with findings from the brand study. And then the last phase of the research was taking time to listen to the campus. And so myself and Jackie did that earlier this spring. We met with a total of 45 folks throughout campus, also academics, athletics, student affairs, et cetera, faculty, and just took time. We had a series of 8 questions that we asked, and we just took time to listen. And then we kind of mined that data. Jackie asked the questions. I transcribed the responses, and we did a qualitative analysis, and kind of like almost a word cloud type exercise like Christie, identified a lot of different things going on across those 3 studies. But for the purposes of this conversation today, one of those big ones that we saw was in that professional space, whether it was mentoring, networking, helping to find jobs while as students, as well as certainly after the student graduates and becomes an alum. There was this gap, especially in the mentoring space. Everybody, we had complete uniformity across all 3 studies, which I should note also did include students. Of everybody says they want mentoring, and we've tried that in the past, and it has not worked. We've learned lessons from that, and we're kind of now at the point where we're at a kind of a crossroads or a decision point of, all right, the research is in, as it were. What are we going to do about that as a university?
Yeah. Anything additionally to add there, Jackie?
No, I think Matt kind of really teed that up for us. I mean, that's really where we have been in terms of this long-term process. We started out with looking at overall our brand. We wanted to talk about our brand and how do our alumni feel about our brand, not just the brand of the Alumni Association, but the brand of the university overall. That was the first initial key piece of it. Then we went in, like I said, the Alumni Attitude Survey was a survey that perhaps many of the campuses have already taken as well. And then we were able to correlate that data with the CSU and all the campuses there, and then went into the campus listening tour. And there was just lots of discussion, very, very powerful discussion with the deans, and really opened up a lot of dialogue in terms of where the campus wants to go. And what we were very excited about was the synergies across both what we were hearing externally as well as what we were hearing internally.
That's great. That's great. Matthew, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would love to get a little insight into that moment when the VP of Advancement leaned over and asked what your alumni want. Why do you think that you didn't necessarily have a good answer to that question? Was there a process of losing touch with your alumni? Like, kind of what was that before state? Does that question resonate at all?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that factored into the answer that I gave her. Number one, I was, newer at that point. I'd been here 2.5, maybe 3 years. Our vice president was new. We have a new president of the university. Our alumni association was historically dues-based. We left that model maybe 9, 10 years ago now. That's a big transition where you're focused on, generally speaking, servicing your members and not as much the majority or, the majority of your alumni base. So it's a paradigm shift. So, and we know many alumni organizations are kind of in that same space. So I think that's really kind of history speaking into the present. I think the other thing that I meant by that was I'm a research geek, and you can hear a lot of things. You can see what a lot of other alumni organizations are doing, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's right for your alumni organization or your campus. Yeah. And so it was maybe at the heart of that was also saying, we know certain things, and we interact with alumni a lot. Many people interact with alumni, and we hear stuff anecdotally, but let's actually take the time to do some research. We are in higher ed after all, right? And actually put down on paper and show some intentional effort in that we took time to hear directly from alumni in a formalized, organized fashion, because then we, at least hopefully, can move forward with greater confidence, both our campus partners and with our alumni base. Jackie?
Yeah, and just to add to that where that interaction took place was in a brand strategy meeting in terms of that, and that's really where the key piece of this started was, what do the alumni think of Fresno State and the brand of that? And so that's where a lot of this, I think, where Matt came from, that perspective of what do they think of the brand, what do they think of the university? We didn't know because we had not done anything intentionally into that space. We had done an alumni attitude survey overall, but not intentionally about what do they feel about the brand of the university, as well as what do they feel about the brand of the Alumni Association.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Christie, does Kansas have a dues paying system as well? Is that how your alumni association is structured?
Yeah, we are member based, and we obviously have a philanthropy side as well.
So it's interesting that we have two different perspectives here, having transitioned from dues-based to non-dues-based, and then with a continued dues-based. I'm wondering, Christie, if you think there might be a challenge in implementing your survey to just your dues paying members, or versus like a larger study that could be done with the non-dues paying members? Anything along those lines you could share?
We've actually done both. So
Oh,
we've reached out to members and non-members in all of these surveys. So I think that's really important to note too. Yes, while we're member based and we are listening to our members who are dues paying members, we also know that it's important to hear from constituents that are not dues based. What's holding them back? Why aren't they becoming members? Why aren't they engaging with us in certain ways? So we are evaluating all of that data as well.
awesome, awesome. Awesome. And then there's one last question that I kind of wrote down as I was listening to some of the answers, and I'm curious to hear both your thoughts on this, but it seems like there were lots of different phases to the studies, multiple surveys being done. I'm wondering if you considered or mitigated for some survey exhaustion and how you kind of managed that along the process. We'll start with Matthew and Jackie, if I could.
Yeah, I think that's always a good question. I don't think we had too many problems with that, being that the first phase, the brand study, was focus groups, and that was a total of 45 alumni that responded to that. We did do mass email marketing, to those groups that we identified, but it wasn't until probably about a year and a half later, actually, that the alumni attitude survey was then deployed through both email marketing and social media kind of promotional strategy. That survey, depending upon how fast you take a survey, could take up to 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. We did find, though, this is the third time we've done that survey, and this was our largest response rate that we've had thus far. And probably a lot of that was just we have a stronger social media presence, more emails, and we did a more effective job actually at the promoting and marketing of the survey itself. We did incentivize it. You got a free pop-in if you completed the form to give us your information. So there was a little incentive there. So we didn't find that we got comments outright, and mm-hmm. nor through the number of alumni that replied to the quantitative survey did we kind of think or got concerned about survey fatigue.
Kristi, anything to share on that topic there?
I don't think we had much survey fatigue either. We had pretty much the same, average engagement score across the board. So I don't necessarily think there was any kind of holdback. I always kind of joke, I think our alumni are pretty straightforward with us as far as giving us their opinion and feedback. So I don't think they mind, at least some of them don't mind taking the survey, even though we're doing it kind of on a every couple of years kind of cadence, if you will. Mm. So
great.
Real quick, one of the struggles we did have when we were doing the focus groups was, I think a couple of the focus groups, we really wanted to get alumni who were not engaged. So of course, by virtue of the fact that they're not engaged and we're asking them to get engaged via a focus group, we actually had to rethink our recruitment strategy for that, because we were not able to recruit as many alumni as we needed to meet that initial date. We had to reschedule that focus group and then circle back around. We really tried to make sure that we didn't leverage relationships that we had with maybe alumni we knew, because that could, bias them. Right. And so it was hard to get unengaged alumni to become engaged via the brand study. So we did hit a hiccup there where we had to kind of circle back around, reschedule that focus group, but we were able to get it accomplished.
From a logistical perspective there, Matthew, did you have any difficulties with alumni data for those unengaged folks? Was that kind of a struggle to find accurate and updated information for those that you might be looking to get in touch with?
There's data is always, I think, an opportunity for improvement for all of us that we could all agree with. We have been making some good strides over the last few years about increasing the quantity and quality of data on our alumni. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that was an inhibitor too much. We didn't really see through the email marketing a massive opt-out rate. It was just lack of initial response.
Got it. Understood. Yeah. Great. Well, we're going to move on here to the next topic. But before we do, I'd love to get a sense of the audience here. If you were to conduct a survey, and I know that we had 73% of you who have said you've already done this, I would love to hear a bit about some of your responses and some of the information you actually collected here. So what would you expect, or what have you seen to be the thing that your alumni are most interested in. Again, I'll launch another poll here. And for this, we're thinking more about our alumni asking for career assistance, philanthropic opportunities, more events, perhaps some mentoring opportunities. What was the thing that you actually found with your survey, or those of you who are thinking about conducting a survey, what would you expect to see to be the #1 thing that alumni are asking for here? Leave this poll open for about another 30 seconds or so. And in this one, you multiple answers are permitted if the technology has worked as I expect it to. Great. All right, well, I'll share the results here. And as you might expect, career assistance is one of the top things that alumni are asking for here in terms of what they're asking of the Alumni Association, along with mentoring opportunities. Interesting to see how philanthropic opportunities kind of falls to the bottom there, with only 8% saying that that's what alumni would be most interested in here. Let me go back here to our slide deck and ask one more question. I told you it was going to be engaging and keep you on your toes here, so hopefully this is all right. But what do you think the biggest barrier to acting on this information is, or at least your instincts around what alumni are asking for? Is it the staff bandwidth, perhaps unclear connection to giving, that you're having a hard time kind of drawing that correlation, or are you having difficulty getting stakeholder buy-in? Would love to know a little bit more about, what's the big barrier here to kind of driving forward on some of these initiatives. Leave this open for probably another 30 seconds. Great. And here, no real surprise, but staff bandwidth was the #1 answer here to this poll. As you can see, 84% of you said that staff bandwidth was the #1 challenge to really getting some of these initiatives put in place here. And then other institutional priorities. Sometimes, providing that career assistance might not actually be part of an advancement or engagement strategy, and other priorities might, take precedence there. So would love to get the panel's thoughts on this as we progress and talk a little bit about how you were able to mitigate those challenges in your own institution. But let's talk a little bit more about kind of what you hope to learn. We've already covered some of these first 2 bullets, but I'd love to hear from Christie. When you went into this survey, did you expect to hear that career assistance was the #1 thing? Is that kind of the thing that your hypothesis before you started the survey that alumni were going to respond to?
Yeah, I mean, I think given that there's now been historical surveys to draw from, we kind of anticipated that we were going to continually hear from them that that's where we were lacking. In fact, your poll, I'm looking at our gap analysis for our survey results in 2013, and it aligns with exactly with what the pollers were saying. We were lacking in career assistance, and that our performance we're undervaluing how important it is. And so, yeah, I think we kind of, after that baseline in 2009, expected 2013, because we didn't make it a priority, that we were going to see those same results. Mm-hmm. Now that we have had another survey in 2013 and have taken action since then, I think, yes, we kind of launched the gun before we got our career services off the ground a little bit, if you will. But I think if you give us, another year or 2, you will see that our results will start changing in the career space, because my position just was created last February. So we haven't even been into this for 2 years yet, and we're already making great strides. So I think that we anticipated what we were going to get for the last couple of surveys, and now I'm hoping that we're going to see the tide shifting, and that we will see better results when we're looking at that provide career assistance and mentoring. I think we'll see something different now.
That's great. I love the idea. I wrote measuring over time kind of in my notes here. and how you're able to kind of identify that the service and that gap that you spoke of is shrinking as you kind of progressed over these surveys and are able to provide more and more of those services to your alumni. Matthew, Jackie, would love to hear, was career or mentoring the top thing? I know, Matthew, you spoke a little bit about mentoring as kind of the thing you were expecting to hear from on the surveys. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that after having done these 3 studies, that quite honestly, we didn't learn anything we didn't already know. And I don't think that's bad. You know, it affirmed things that people already knew, again, kind of anecdotally. Now, certainly if you discover something new, that's great as well. But it showed that, whether it's Matt or Jackie or a director of development or a vice president or a faculty member or a student, a dean that we're talking to, whoever it might be, that we're all kind of hearing the same thing. And if the research can show that, it shows these are, let's say, kind of some objective realities that everybody's on the same page. And that's a great place to be. And so all the research kind of showed in a number of different areas. Career development and networking and mentoring was, just one of those clusters, let's say. So it was good because people could see, my gosh, we're all hearing, sensing, seeing the same pain points as well as potential opportunities. The question now is, all right, well, can we rally around that to make progress? What do we want to do with these insights, which we already knew?
I think that one of the things that we've learned from this as well is because we tried to dabble in the online mentoring ourselves in that, and we tried to engage the campus overall through that program. And one of the things that while we've learned a lot of this, and these weren't new lessons in terms of mentoring, what we have learned is we have to go into this together with career development, or we have to have university buy-in in terms of that. It can't just be something that the alumni office, like for instance, what Christie's going through, they've dedicated salaries, positions, all of those kinds of things. What we've shared with our vice president at this point is this has to be a cabinet level, or this has to be a decision made across the campus in terms of us moving forward. Now that we've seen the data, and it's not surprising, it is what we're hearing now in terms of where are we going as a direction as the university.
Mm-hmm. So
I would second that. Sorry to interrupt, Matt. I would second that. We've here at KU, I was lucky enough to come into this position, but it has been a long journey and a kind of a journey across campus is what I like to refer to it as, and getting that buy-in. And that's exactly what you're saying is this is not an alumni association, just an alumni association problem. This is something that we need to be working across campus on to get the buy-in from students even today. Why do you need the alumni association? Well, when you're out in the real world, you're going to be reaching back into the alumni association or the university, and you want to know that your alumni association is here as a support mechanism for you in your career journey. So I would echo that it is important to get all the players on campus equally as invested. We got buy-in from our chancellor before this position was created. So our chancellor believes in this, the importance of this. We talk a lot about brain drain and our talent leaving our community and going to the coasts. We're here in the Midwest, we're losing great talent to the coast because of, it's nicer to live by the ocean than it is maybe here in the Midwest. But it's important for our alumni association and our chancellor and our provost office to be all working hand in hand to keep this talent pool here locally.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that I think is sometimes it's actually most fascinating, but often sometimes most frustrating, is that when you have a hypothesis about what you're going to hear from a survey, the survey then backs up your hypothesis. And as you said, Matthew, you didn't learn anything you didn't already know, but you still have to kind of rise up and go through a stakeholder buy-in process. So I'm curious, how did you kind of leverage, you had your hypothesis, now you have your data. What's the process and literally the X's and O's of going to the stakeholders and getting that higher level buy-in, whether it be the chancellor in Christie's case or VPs in other cases around this career initiative is so important for alumni. How did you go about that?
Christie, are you going?
I'll let you guys present on that because I wasn't here during that time when they did that here.
Sure. We're not there yet. I don't know. I mean, we're not there yet. We've, vetted this in terms of on our, with our vice president. We are in an interesting place right now where there's some discussion about literally bringing physically together career development and the Alumni Association, the Alumni Engagement Operation, physically together in one space through our comprehensive campaign that's coming up. And so there's now going to be some discussions programmatically about what that looks like if we're going to get to that point. People understand and have heard the data and understand, that there's a need in this regard, and that there are models out there that exist in terms of this. But I do think that we are, struggling a little bit in terms of some silos, in terms of career development resides in student affairs, alumni, resides in advancement. And I think that we're still at that point where we've got to work through what that's going to look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things we did after we did the brand study, the focus groups, and then the quantitative survey was we took all that and we kind of did a road show on campus. We shared the results, whether they were good or bad. We just kind of put it out there to create awareness. And it was very well received by many entities on campus. And then as we entered the third phase, that campus listening tour, I think I can't prove otherwise, but I think the fact that we'd been so open with what we found, and we paid extra to have, especially the survey, have it analyzed by college, and we provided that data to each dean for their area, that perhaps, created a more warm audience. Not that it was not warm, but just it opened up the lines of communication such that when Jackie and me went to do the campus listening tour to kind of prime the pump or pave the way, we were very, very happy with the level of candor in those campus listening tours. Things, that aren't happy-go-lucky, kind of pain points, frustrations were shared openly. And again, the things aren't necessarily good, but the fact that people in leadership positions are willing to speak openly about that is wonderful. And that's a huge first step in everybody kind of being open, being honest, and willing to share. And then to Jackie's point, yeah, we're not there yet as it relates to next steps. We've created initial awareness, but we're continuing to try to push that back up to campus leadership because of like what Jackie said earlier. We tried it initially just coming out of our office, but saw that didn't work. And we really do want to try to have more campus collaboration and a coalition of the willing, you might say.
That's great. Yeah, fantastic. I'd like to kind of to shift gears a little bit and talk about how you've used the survey data and what kind of programs that you've implemented based on that data. So career services, mentoring opportunities have been kind of the thing you've been hearing from both anecdotally in brand studies and surveys. What are some of the things that you've implemented based on those surveys? PeopleGrove being involved. Christy, maybe we'll start with you in the Jayhawk Career Network. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's structured and what you're doing around that to kind of meet the need that you've seen with these surveys?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I mentioned, my position was created as a direct result from our survey analysis. And really, when I took this role, there wasn't really an idea of what this position would do. We had talked about, does this position review resumes, set up internship opportunities, or, it kind of ran the gamut of what this position would do. But really what I've honed in on after listening across campus, after working to launch our mentoring platform, campus and university wide, into our entire alumni base, is really I need to be the connector. And my role in the Alumni Association is to help our alumni navigate career resources. We have a lot of career resources at the ready. They're just really spread out and scattered all over the universe when you start really trying to boil it down. So my job, how I view my job, is that I am the connector. I make connections happen, either alumni to students, alumni to alumni, alumni to business, whatever that looks like. I view myself as just that person that helps facilitate all of that. But there's also some other strategic priorities out of this that has made this Jayhawk Career Network successful in the 18 months that it's kind of been launched. We really viewed PeopleGrove and KU Mentoring as an opportunity to have what I like to refer to as the anchor tenant in our career services model. So we really focus on a few things. We focus on KU Mentoring. That's first and foremost. That's for our entire alumni base. We are dues paid membership organization. However, this program is open to everyone. So there is no barrier for entry for students or alumni at the like. So we're really focused on KU mentoring, both from an alumni side and student side. Career networking opportunities. So we have events, we might have panel discussions, things like that, but just opportunities for alumni to meet, network, explore careers, opportunities, etc. Professional development and continuing education, I kind of lump into one category almost. And this is really where that kind of being the connector, I view my job as being the connector, because we have continuing education programs and we have lifelong learning programs, but those have only been shared with smaller populations in the past. And so again, taking this model as a connector and taking this information and then putting it on a bigger audience scale. So professional development, continuing education, and industry engagement. And how does that apply to the Alumni Association? That's where it gets a little sticky, because there are a lot of people talking to industry partners, whether you're talking to recruiters that are coming to campus to recruit students, or you're talking to businesses who maybe need to hire interns, or you've got entrepreneurs looking to move their business, relocate back to our metro area. So that's where we like to play a role, or I like to play a role with our chamber, our local chambers. We're really plugged in with industry partners, and we're a research institution, so our research partners and things like that. So really that's where we're driving our strategic direction. It's not me sitting here doing resume reviews. It's really me making sure that I am staying kind of casting this wide net of career services and able to disseminate that information on a broader scale. So in a very short time, we've had some really great results. We've got 5,000 people in our mentoring platform, Alumni alone. So we've already answered their question. Here's your opportunity to come and be a mentor, but also here's a place where we're offering career advancement and opportunities. So we've been able to launch that. We've launched a career newsletter to those people that are interested in career information. It's really highlighting success stories of Jayhawks all over the world. And again, without me having to go dig up those stories, those are stories that are just kind of brought to the top and pushed out really high level. And then we've got networking series happening all the time. So you can see that just in a short time, we've been able to do a lot without, with very limited bandwidth, if you will. So
yeah, and that's something that our attendees today mentioned, with staff bandwidth being such a challenge. It's great to hear that you're kind of crowdsourcing almost a lot of those resources that already exist across campus and bringing them together in that connectivity kind of role that you've described. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would say, because I think a lot of institutions fall into this category, at least some that I've benchmarked with that are also PeopleGrove clients, just the siloed and individual departments that and everybody gets really protective, and especially in the career space, a lot of departments are very protective with what they do and who they'll help, and I only help students, and that's fine to operate like this. But really, when you're putting out a program that's answering the call of your alumni base, you really have to step back from that and say, what is this one KU approach, or this one institutional approach that we should all adopt and get everybody to buy in? And when you show them that this can be successful for them it goes a lot further. So that's how I would say we've been able to be successful here is we've said, okay, School of Business, if we do this together, here's the rewards that you're going to reap. You're going to see alumni satisfaction go up. You're going to see philanthropy coming in. And so we've been able to spin it as this one KU approach that makes this more successful that way.
Awesome. Matthew, Jackie, would love to hear some of the things that you're working on to kind of meet that need that you've identified.
I think that one of the things that I'm envious of you, Christy.
Yeah. We both are.
One of the things that really started hitting on, in the alumni space, we talk about benefits, and typically the way that we interpret that is kind of the affinity partners, and if you're a member, you get discounts to this as a quote-unquote benefit, and that is true and good. The larger, maybe you might say the underlying value or the meta value is actually that of creating value. And so we've literally, it sounds very basic, but we are changing our language to where it's more value-driven language. What do we do to create value for alumni? And your very first slide, had value at the front of it. Value leads to engagement, leads to giving. You have to earn the right to be heard, because we live in a day and age where alumni don't need their alma mater to connect with other alumni or to do this or to do that. We know alumni don't need to connect with us, our office, in order to get involved on campus. So the world has changed, and we need to catch up to that. So we're trying to change the lens through which we look at our activities of what creates value. And we know that we cannot create value on our own. Value is co-produced. That is between us and alumni responding to that, or us responding to what alumni tell us and us doing something about it and then messaging that back out and delivering on that quote-unquote promise. So that's been one thing. Related to that, the other thing that Jackie and I have talked a lot about to folks within our office, within our division, on campus is we don't need to create a culture of alumni engagement. When you look across this campus, and Christy kind of talked about this, alumni are in fact very engaged. We just don't know about it. So we don't need to create that culture. We need to recognize that culture, better understand what's going on, account for it, celebrate it, promote it, and perpetuate it. We don't need to create more. We need to do a better job at recognizing what already is. And that then will result in more being created. And the result of that is we create more value, which includes, I would submit, institutional priorities of we need better data. Well, if you create the right thing and alumni engage with it, the result of that is they'll attend this event, they become a mentor, and they give their data to us, which then enables us to give more targeted solicitation, ask for giving. It can lead to giving because we, in fact, have done a handshake to them before an outstretched hand. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of, I think we're starting to turn a corner a little bit of just reframing our language. And I don't know, it sounds maybe very esoteric, but creating a new paradigm through which we look at some of this stuff. And like Christy, we suffer from just a lot of operational and organizational silos. But we know, and probably no university is any different, our alumni look at us as Fresno State, not this office or that program or this institute. It's Fresno State. So as the consumer, they see us as one, which creates the disconnect then when they try to engage with us. They can't. We had one alum say, there's no clear pathway. So if we do that, the reward is we more effectively engage in a range of directions, which can include and legitimately should include giving, as well as, mentoring and career development and being a guest speaker, serving on an advisory council, whatever that may be. Engagement is a broad area. So we're very much, I think, on the front end of that process of creating a new paradigm and a lens through which we look at and view our alumni, chiefly through their lens, not ours.
Mm-hmm. And Matthew and Jackie, I'd love to hear how you plan on using PeopleGrove as well to help with that paradigm shift.
That is not a simple answer. That goes back to that survey question of kind of what's preventing you. And we said we've got a lot of a little bit of each of those. It is lines of authority, it is funding, it's organizational goals, it's all those things. And that's again where we're at of everybody here and alumni say they want to offer mentoring. What are we actually going to do about that, though? Because we cannot do it on our own from a funding perspective, from a staffing perspective, from a division priorities perspective. It can't just be our priority. It has to be partnership driven. We could play a major role in that, but that the conversation has to be started before we can move forward with implementing a given solution, whatever that may be.
Like I said, we tried that before, and that's intentionally not where we're going to be going again, and it doesn't send the right message. Again, as Matt said, everybody views us as Fresno State. We need to come at this as Fresno State overall in terms of what we're going to be marketing, both to the two biggest constituencies we have, alumni and students. So to be able to do that, we have to be able to come at this together.
The last effort we made, we had no problem getting alumni to sign up to connect with students. In fact, we stopped marketing the opportunity to alumni because, of course, the more alumni you have sign up, if you don't have students continuing to access that platform in greater numbers, the less likely any one alum is ever going to be connected with. And so that creates disengagement. Yeah. So our alumni are not the quote-unquote problem. We know they are more than ready and willing to raise their hand and pitch in. It's really the campus environment, creating more of those strategic partnerships. And you're never going to get everybody on the same page, but some of those mission critical early partners that you've got to line up before you start something up.
And that's where I think, to go back to Jackie's point about bringing alumni and career together, when I was implementing the PeopleGrove product at Georgetown, it was that Career Center, the Cawley Career Education Center on the main campus at Georgetown, is the key partner, because it's the students that are going to drive the activity, drive the connections, really reach out to those alums. And you're 100% right. It's really important to make sure that you're engaging students with the platform as well, so that the alumni themselves are engaged with as your end user. I do want to, before we get to the last two questions here, I want to touch on one thing that I've heard consistently across the conversation, and that was the engagement with students. To kind of go back to that issue about students and sometimes their knowledge of the Alumni Association. And are there anything, other than the mentorship opportunities and some of the things you might be working with PeopleGrove, have you considered approaching students from an engagement lens, because they will soon be those alumni that will be part of that equation, value, engagement, and giving? Does that question resonate? Christy, could I start with you there?
Yeah, actually it resonates a lot, because right around the time that I started in this role, we reshifted our strategic priorities here at the Alumni Association, and along with career, the second major strategic priority for us is growing our student alumni network to the biggest in the Big 12. Over the last 18 months, I'm happy to report that we are one of the biggest in the Big 12, because we changed our model. Instead of asking students for money up front, hey, give us 25 bucks, you can be in this really cool network, we started doing more intentional programming. We removed the fee barrier for them to join, and we started giving them exactly what they want, which is free food and opportunities to network with each other. So we almost had a groundswell of really robust programming on our campus. And what we did was, when we launched KU Mentoring, we made the #1 benefit to being in Student Alumni Network. Our Student Alumni Network is the access to alumni and the access to this mentoring network. So if you don't know how to get the app, the KU Alumni app on your phone, and become a student member that way, you can log in through our KU Mentoring platform and become a member there. So once they become a member, we now have an audience that we can talk to all of the time about our programming, our alumni. We do a lot of alumni stories. We do a lot of opportunities for them to meet alumni or come to our programming with alumni. And so we really see this as going hand in hand and getting them started early. In fact, we've got ambassadors within the Student Alumni Network that are our mouthpieces to their peers. So they go into the classrooms and they talk about joining SAN and joining the KU Mentoring platform. And then it just becomes this kind of word of mouth campaign that they're leading, and we're not really doing anything on our end. So it has been, because these two priorities really overlap, it's been a focus of our entire organization, and it's a focus of our campus partners as well. So that's been really helpful for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Really appreciate that. For the sake of time, I will kind of defer. If there's any questions that you all have out there in the audience, would love to hear those as we go through. We have about 5 minutes left, but as those questions come in, Matthew, Jackie, I would like to start with you and just asking the final question from my end in saying, what advice would you really give to our attendees today when they think about providing that value, learning what that value is, and how to really and engage them along that giving equation?
One of the big lessons I've learned coming from the private sector, it's very different here in the public sector. And so for me, just in general in my role, let alone kind of more specific to this conversation about career development and mentoring, was developing those relationships on campus and understanding what the needs and interests and motivations are, and how the campus does or does not work. Because I learned that was very informative to our first effort, and figuring out ways to create those partnerships where everybody can benefit, even if you have to give up a little bit, or maybe a lot, but making sure those partnerships are in place. For me, that's been almost 6 years in. That's been a big kind of realization versus private sector, where it's much more top down aligned and command and control, I guess you would say.
Jackie, Christie, anything you want to add in terms of advice for our attendees here as they think about kind of identifying that value?
I think Matthew covered. I would agree. I also came from the corporate world, and the biggest lesson I've learned is just making inroads on campus. And it doesn't matter what department it's with. It could be anything from the School of Business to one of these small organizations, a support organization within campus. It's important that everybody's aligned and moving the same direction. And we've had some pretty major breakthroughs because the Alumni Association has come in to say, hey, we're a partner in this, and we can help you. We can help you get your goals met in addition to getting our goals met.
I also don't think that it's necessarily something that they won't. One of the things that we've talked about is that everybody doesn't need something that's for free, that everybody doesn't need something that just because it's value, that means that, you're providing something to somebody that's either access or, but they're willing to, how they would determine value is that they're getting either before or they're getting something in terms of, something a little bit different and maybe, ahead of time for somebody. So when you were talking about, when Christie was talking a little bit about the students and some of the things that, they were doing with the Student Alumni Network that she had, that's perceived as value, and alumni want to feel included. And as Matt has indicated, previously today, that you talk about there's not many things right now that aren't provided outside of what we do. We just need to be able, they can connect with alumni, they can connect with students. It's being able to put that into one space in terms of what we do together as Fresno State or as a campus overall.
Wonderful. Well, I want to just express my appreciation to Matthew, Jackie, and Christie here. I really appreciate the conversation today. I've really learned a lot about what's kind of happening across different campuses. So I really want to thank you for your contributions today to the webinar. And thank everyone for attending. I really appreciate your engagement, answering the poll questions, submitting some of your questions here. So thank you for being a part of today's conversation. And I hope you have a great day and a great rest of the week. Matthew, Jackie, Christie, thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you.